Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into the warmth of a Persian hammam, where steam clings to every surface and even your thoughts begin to soften at the edges. The air is thick, but not heavy, rich with the scent of stone, earth, and faint roses. A marble bench gleams under a domed ceiling. Water drips slowly from a copper pipe into a carved basin. You sit on the edge, skin already slick from the heat, toes curling against tiles so old they've forgotten who first laid them. There are no modern distractions here, no glowing screens, no algorithm suggesting what comes next, just the hush of breath, the quiet hiss of vapor, and your own pulse settling into the rhythm of centuries. You haven't even bathed yet, and already your shoulders have started to drop. Of course, the fantasy here is lovely, but real hammams, they didn't always smell like roses. There were moments of awkward shuffling. The floors could be a little too warm, and if you forgot your sandals, let's just say you learned quickly not to do that again, because science or not, blistered feet are blistered feet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love imagining someone halfway across the world, just as sleepy as you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin just outside the hammam, in a tiled vestibule shaded from the sun. It's cooler here, and the contrast to the desert heat outside feels like stepping into a different world, one carefully crafted for this exact sensation. The architecture isn't an afterthought. Persian bathhouses were engineered to transition the body gently through temperature, humidity, and space. That first cool room is called the sarbine, and it functions as both a dressing area and a social buffer where you can disrobe, rest, and slowly shed the day. The stone under your feet absorbs heat, but doesn't give it back too quickly. Above you, a dome punctuated by small glass apertures filters sunlight into soft beams. Some of the glass is blue, some green, some clear, designed to calm the mind even as your eyes adjust. Everything here is deliberate, from the echo of your footsteps to the placement of the water basin. It's a choreography of experience, built by architects who thought deeply about what it meant to bathe, to cleanse, to transition. These early Persian bathhouses weren't simply about hygiene, they were an intersection of engineering, medicine, and spirituality. As early as the 6th century, under the Sasanian Empire, communal bathhouses became essential civic structures, unlike Roman bathhouses, which were often grand and imperial. Persian hammams were neighborhood-based, intimate, culturally nuanced. The influence of Zoroastrianism, the dominant belief system in Persia before Islam, shaped early concepts of cleanliness. In that framework, cleanliness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Water was sacred. To purify the body was to prepare the soul. You weren't just washing off dust, you were aligning yourself with cosmic order. Later, under Islamic rule, that spiritual layer remained but evolved. Cleanliness before prayer is mandatory in Islam, and the bathhouse became both a practical solution and a cultural staple. By the time of the Safavid dynasty in the 16th century, hammams had become deeply woven into Persian urban life. They stood near mosques and bazaars, and some were even funded by royal endowments. You pass through a low archway and enter the Garmkhane, The hot room. The shift is immediate. The air is thicker, scented faintly with minerals and heat. Here, the walls are covered in glazed tiles that shimmer faintly with condensation. The dome above is higher, and small star-shaped skylights beam concentrated shafts of light into the mist. You sit again. Sweat begins to bead at your temples. The human body reacts predictably to this kind of heat. It relaxes, pores open, muscles loosen. But Persian architects didn't leave this to chance. The heat you're feeling isn't just hot air. It's carefully moderated steam, rising from a concealed tonner, a subterranean furnace that also heats the water channels running beneath the floor. Think radiant floor heating, 1,000 years before anyone thought to patent it. This part of the bathhouse often featured marble benches or heated stone platforms. The heat is therapeutic, but not extreme. It's meant to induce a calm sweat, not scorch, and the acoustics here designed to soften voices and hush movement, so even if someone speaks, it floats. Mainstream historians agree Persian bathhouses were among the most technologically refined in the Islamic world, rivaled only by those in Ottoman lands. But historians still argue whether their design principles were purely practical or deeply metaphysical. Was it just airflow and pressure differentials? Or was it about mimicking a kind of womb-like serenity? You pour warm water from a basin over your shoulders. The splash echoes gently, and the sensation is immediate, clarifying, grounding. Even modern spa designers study ancient Persian bathhouses for ideas: passive heating, thermodynamic zoning, materials that hold temperature, all of it engineered before modern plumbing or electrical grids existed. There's a clay bowl beside you, filled with what looks like gray mud. That comes later. For now, you just breathe. Let the warmth seep deeper. Maybe even close your eyes. Here, in this chamber where sound bends and water sings, history doesn't feel distant. It feels like condensation gathering on your skin, present, persistent, and quietly enveloping. You move slowly now, no rush, no sharp turns, as you leave the heat-drenched Garmkhane behind and enter the next chamber. The stone underfoot shifts temperature, just slightly cooler, while the air remains heavy with moisture. This is the khazina, the soaking pool chamber, and you've entered the very heart of the hammam's quiet architecture. It isn't large. It doesn't need to be. A single basin, sunken into the floor and filled with still, warm water, waits ahead of you like a placid mirror. Your foot touches the water's surface first, then your ankle, yes, your calf, and finally your whole body slides in. You're surrounded now, not just by heat, but by centuries of spatial logic. Persian bathhouses were never just a random collection of tiled rooms. They followed a layout as disciplined as any laboratory or temple. Each room responded to a different bodily need, each transition carefully sequenced, from cool entry to hot exposure, to soaking calm and final rinse. The layout ensured that temperature shock was avoided. The human body adjusts best in stages, and this choreography was mapped out with precision long before anyone coined the term thermal cycle. Take the domes, for example. Each room's ceiling isn't merely for aesthetics. It's a calculated structure designed to manage steam. High domes allow vapor to rise, circulate, and condense at a safe distance from bathers. The oculi, those small, jewel-colored glass inlays, aren't for decoration. They're for light modulation. They let in just enough sunlight to avoid darkness, but not enough to overheat the space, Scholars have measured how their spacing allows for maximum diffused illumination during peak bath hours. But here's the quiet twist. No two bathhouses are exactly the same. The architecture shifted subtly with region, elevation, even prevailing winds. The Persian plateau stretches across wildly different climates, from the arid deserts near Yazd to the damp Caspian coast. Builders adapted, roof lines shifted, window sizes varied, chimneys were angled depending on prevailing breezes. What seems like traditional design was actually site-specific science. You lean back, head against the warm edge of the soaking pool, and let your thoughts drift upward toward the ceiling. Some ceilings are plain brick, others shimmer with tile mosaics in geometric precision. The Safavid era bathhouses loved symmetry, 8-point stars, interlocking hexagons, infinite tessellations. It wasn't just visual pleasure. Geometry, especially Islamic geometry, was seen as a form of divine order. By bathing beneath these repeating patterns, you weren't just scrubbing your skin, you were placing your body inside a cosmic map. And then there are the acoustics. You notice it now, how no splash echoes sharply, how voices seem to soften at the edge of your hearing. The domes and angled walls absorb sound, reflect it gently, and prevent it from becoming disruptive. This is no accident. Hammam designers thought about sound just as much as heat or water. After all, you're here to cleanse, not to be startled by someone's sneeze bouncing off 3 walls like a cannon. Historians still argue whether the progression of chambers in a Persian bathhouse was purely physiological or partly symbolic. Was it about adapting your blood flow to increasing temperature, or did each room represent a step in an internal purification journey? Body, spirit, mind, perhaps both. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that architecture here is not static. It breathes with you. As your body warms and cools, so do the surfaces, so does the air, so does the bathhouse itself. It's like the building was designed to exhale when you do. In this moment, floating gently. You imagine the bathhouse filled as it once was, murmurs from other bathers, a cup clinks softly on stone. Somewhere, a child laughs, quickly hushed. The room was always social, yes, but never chaotic, designed with zones for conversation, for solitude, and for quiet reflection. And somewhere above your heads, perhaps hidden in a narrow corridor or behind a latticed screen, a pipe made of baked clay delivers hot water, flowing from a reservoir that was heated with scrap wood and palm husks. Even fuel was calculated, efficient, sustainable long before it became fashionable. You let your arms float wide, toes brushing the smooth pool floor. Every detail, every inch of this space speaks to a broader philosophy that the built environment should care for the human body. Not challenge it, not overwhelm it, but cradle it, guide it, help it soften back into itself. You've been here for some time now, but you're in no hurry. The room doesn't demand it. The bathhouse expects patience, and in a world that rarely pauses. Maybe that's the most radical thing about this space. It rewards slowness, eventually, when your fingers have just begun to prune and your breathing has found its lowest rhythm. You rise. Water beads off your skin like glass pearls. You wrap yourself in a thin cotton cloth, the kind that dries instantly and clings softly. You pass once more through the garmchana, now quieter, and then toward a small alcove where you'll prepare for the next stage. It's not the end of the experience. It's just the next shift in temperature, in time, in intention. Your steps carry you now into a narrower corridor. The temperature here is ambiguous, not quite hot, not quite cool, but the air moves in a very particular way. There's a breeze, faint and guided, rising from grates in the floor and vanishing into hidden flues above. You don't notice the architecture at first. It works so subtly, so precisely, that it just feels natural. But you are, in fact, walking through one of the world's earliest examples of climate controlled space. You've entered the unseen laboratory of the Persian Bathhouse, the realm of thermodynamics, pressure gradients, and passive airflow systems that long predate modern HVAC units. That gentle air movement you just felt, it's the product of deliberate calculations by engineers and builders who didn't have digital sensors or blueprints. Just a centuries-old understanding of how air behaves when nudged by heat, pressure, and gravity. The hammam isn't heated randomly. It's a living mechanism. At its core, quite literally, is the toner, or furnace, buried underground and fed by carefully portioned fuel. This furnace doesn't just boil water, it heats the entire foundation of the bathhouse. Hot air rises through cavities in the walls, warming plaster and tile under the floors. Hollow spaces act like slow-moving heat highways. They distribute warmth evenly and prevent overheating in any one area. It's a geothermal ballet. You stop beside a wall now and press your palm to it, warm but not burning. Consistent. The kind of warmth that seeps in rather than shocks. That's no accident. Persian architects and craftsmen built with materials that absorbed and released heat slowly. Clay brick, lime plaster, and glazed tile. Even the paint sometimes included minerals designed to regulate humidity. This system has a name Khan, or sometimes Khanate Garma Bay, thermal channels dedicated just for the bathhouse. Connected to the main Khanate, we'll explore those in the next section. These micro networks allowed the bathhouse to function like a layered organism. Different rooms could be tuned to different levels of heat. Some had radiant floors, others used high domes to let rising heat escape. It's like walking through a building that knows how warm you want to be, even before you do. Historians still argue whether these systems were originally Persian innovations or adaptations from older Roman or Mesopotamian designs. But most agree that Persian bathhouses refined the science to a previously unseen degree. The engineering wasn't a luxury, it was the invisible infrastructure of relaxation. You pass another alcove, just a carved recess in the wall. But if you look closely, you'll see soot stains where flames once licked the edge of a clay oven. Here, a small brazier might have sat, heating water in copper pots for specific treatments. Maybe it was used to prepare herbal infusions, or warm oils, or maybe just to maintain temperature in a cold spell. The bathhouse wasn't static. It adapted daily, hourly, person to person. And here comes one of those quietly wonderful facts. The Persian hammam didn't rely on closed systems. There were no sealed boilers or valves. Everything flowed, air, water, even people, through open networks. Pipes made from clay segments sealed with natural resin. Grates carved from stone. Chimneys disguised as decorative towers. The air you're breathing has been pulled, by subtle suction, through an entire maze of spaces that no visitor ever sees. That's not mystical. That's pressure differentials. Warm air rises, cooler air sinks, and when you shape architecture to take advantage of that, you get circulation without a single moving part. It's basic physics. rendered in elegant brickwork. You pause for a moment, noticing how little you've actually noticed until now. The building never calls attention to its genius. There's no hum, no flicker of machinery, just the experience, the perfect temperature, the soft light, the way even your breath sounds content. And yet there's tension here, too. Quietly embedded in these walls is a dialogue between tradition and innovation. For instance, some bathhouses began experimenting with copper plumbing during the Qajar period, more modern, but less forgiving. Faster heat, but more temperature spikes. Not everyone liked the shift. In fact, conservative bathhouse architects in Shiraz reportedly refused to install metal pipes for decades, arguing they lacked the breath of clay. You chuckle softly at that, clay having breath. But then again, maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Materials aren't just functional. In the hammam, they're emotional, tactile, responsive, the wrong surface, the wrong resonance of heat, and the whole ritual feels off. Even the transition between chambers is a study in subtle physics. Doorways are arched not just for aesthetics, but to shape airflow. You may not realize it, but each room's entrance narrows the passage of heat, keeps steam from escaping, and maintains gradients between zones. Like lungs breathing through carefully regulated nostrils, you sit again, this time on a wide bench beside a dry corner of the chamber. A small brass bowl rests beside a niche in the wall, catching drips from a pipe that leaks on purpose, part of a passive humidification system. The bowl isn't an error, it's a solution. Nothing is wasted. And here's your quirky tidbit for the evening in some older hammams. Engineers would keep lizards around, not as pests, but as thermometers. These little reptiles were sensitive to heat shifts and could predict when a room was warming unevenly. If the lizard moved, the fire needed adjusting. Forget mercury thermometers. Try gecko-based diagnostics. You smile at the image and then lean back, realizing you've been tracing a journey through engineered comfort. The bathhouse isn't just a building, it's a body with arteries and organs and a steady pulse of warmth. And as you breathe in, the air feels just a little softer, like even the molecules themselves are taking it easy. Now you drift backward in time, not in the steam of the bathhouse, but beneath its very foundations. You kneel down near a floor grate, where a faint, steady trickle echoes into the dark, and you imagine the water's path, not from a tank, not from a well drawn up with rope. No, the water here is older, quieter, and far more impressive. It comes from a qanat, an underground aqueduct system perfected by Persian engineers over 2,500 years ago. And if that doesn't sound thrilling, consider this: you're currently bathing in water that likely traveled miles underground through hand-dug tunnels, all without the help of pumps, motors, or even much surface disruption. Just gravity, just slope, just extraordinary, persistent design. You move closer to the sound, knowing that under the hammam and beyond the city walls, an entire subterranean web is always flowing. Qanats begin in the foothills, where mountain runoff is still cool and clean. From there, the water is guided gently downslope through tunnels lined with stone or clay. Along the way, vertical shafts, like breathing holes, are dug up to the surface every few dozen meters. These don't just vent gases, they let in air, help with maintenance, and prevent collapse. And yes, these were all dug by hand. You walk now in your mind, alongside a digger from the Achaemenid era. He descends a narrow shaft with nothing but a flickering oil lamp and a wet cloth over his mouth. He's chipping away at rock that will someday allow a hammam in Yazd or Shiraz to operate in perfect silence. He doesn't know your name, you'll never meet, but your bathhouse moment relies on his precision. The water from these connats enters the bathhouse at a consistent temperature and pressure, enough to fill basins, feed steam chambers, and rinse bodies without splashing or sputtering. It's stored in a holding tank beneath the structure, usually lined with lime plaster to reduce microbial growth. Some tanks even have steps carved into the inside, allowing attendants to descend and clean them when needed. Not glamorous, but necessary. Historians still argue whether qanats were strictly a Persian invention or inspired by earlier Mesopotamian systems. What's not debated is that Persia refined them to a level unmatched elsewhere. They stretched for kilometers, some over 50 miles long. They made entire cities possible in places where surface water never reached. And they were so effective that their core design is still used in some rural areas today. You sit beside a carved basin now, water lapping quietly at the edge. This basin is connected to the qanat by a sloped clay pipe, perhaps half a meter wide. It filters slowly. Some bathhouses even had small settling pools beneath the main floor, where sediment would drop before water was drawn for use. That's not just clever, that's low-tech filtration with zero moving parts. And here's a strange but true tidbit in some cities. Bathhouses paid for premium water access by timing their fill hours to coincide with high flow periods in the qanat system. Early risers got the best flow, latecomers lukewarm dribble. It wasn't just etiquette, it was hydraulic competition. The structure of the qanat also influenced the bathhouse's placement within the city. You'll notice if you look at old maps that hammams were often built along natural slopes or in low-lying quarters, not because of aesthetics, because gravity dictated the flow. Upstream qanats served richer neighborhoods. Downstream ones supplied everyone else. It wasn't always fair, but it was predictable. You close your eyes now and listen, not just to the bathhouse, but to the water beneath it. It's not roaring, it's whispering. Through clay, stone, and silence, and with it comes something else: temperature control. Water from qanats arrived cool, even in midsummer. That meant steam rooms didn't need boiling heat to feel warm. They just needed a temperature difference. Pour cold water over hot stone and you get vapor. Simple, but also poetic. The hammam becomes a kind of dialogue between cold and hot, silence and sound, surface and underground. You stretch out your legs beside the basin. The floor here is faintly warmer than the one you stood on earlier. That's because the thermal system that radiates through the bathhouse works in tandem with the qanat below. Think of it as an invisible duet: fire from beneath, water from beyond. And here's something beautiful. The word qanat comes from the same root as canal and channel, but in Persian. It always implied something hidden: a gift from the mountain, a quiet lifeline, a secret kept well. Today, many qanats lie dry of urban development, motorized pumps, and changing water tables have silenced them. But a few still flow, and some hammams, especially in Yazd, the city most famous for preserving traditional Persian architecture, still use them to this day. You dip your hand into the basin and lift it slowly. Water trickles through your fingers with a kind of patience you rarely encounter anymore. This water didn't arrive fast. It traveled carefully. It waited for you, and as you lean back once more, stone pressing gently against your spine, you can feel that age, not as something gone, but as something still humming beneath you, like a song playing on a frequency only the quiet can hear. Now that you're warmed, steamed, and deeply hydrated, both literally and spiritually, it's time to get your hands dirty, or rather, delightfully slippery, in a corner of the hammam, beneath an arched recess. You find a wide stone bowl filled with what looks like damp clay. A wooden spatula rests nearby. You dip in 2 fingers and lift a palm-sized glob, cool, silken, faintly gritty. This is Gazel, a cleansing agent that's part soap, part tradition, and part quiet chemistry experiment. It doesn't lather like your supermarket variety. It doesn't sparkle or carry branding, but it works, and it's been doing so for centuries, passed from hand to hand, from apothecary to bathhouse, adjusted over time like a family recipe for cleanliness. This mixture could be anything, depending on where and when you're bathing. A popular base is Sabun-e-Markazi, a Castile-like soap made from olive oil and soda ash. But that's just the start. Add white clay from the mountains, powdered rose petals, ground walnut shell for exfoliation, a dash of borax if you're feeling medicinal. One version might tingle slightly, another might smell faintly of citrus, still another might contain a whisper of sulfur, used for skin conditions, though that version usually came with a polite warning from the attendant: don't touch your eyes. You scoop a generous amount and smear it over your arm. The friction is light, but firm as you massage it in. You feel the gritty bits catching on dry patches while the oils begin to soak into your skin. It's not unlike kneading dough, but the dough is your own tired limbs. The preparation of these soaps was both art and science in many cities. There were designated soap artisans, some attached to pharmacies, others independent. They sourced their materials seasonally. Clay had to be harvested at the right moisture level. Oils had to be aged. Some recipes called for days of slow boiling in copper vats, stirred with wooden paddles the size of oars. Once cooled, the mixture was cut into bricks and left to cure under muslin cloth. Historians still argue whether the most effective hammam soaps were local blends or based on trans-regional trade recipes. In the grand cities of the Persian Empire, goods flowed in from all directions: Indian turmeric, Syrian laurel oil, Chinese camphor, and each ingredient carried both practical and symbolic meaning. You work the paste into your scalp now, using the edges of your fingernails like a comb. The clay's faintly earthy scent deepens. There's no shampoo bottle, no foaming agent, and definitely no plastic. And yet, your skin responds. Hair softens, scalp tingles. It's not a chemical scrub. It's an invitation for your body to wake up, stretch, and gently let go. Beside you, a flat dish holds another traditional cleanser, cephadab, a chalky, mineral-rich puck made from powdered limestone and naturally occurring salts. It's rubbed onto a damp cloth, creating a mild abrasive cream used especially for elbows, heels, and anywhere the skin needs a little extra nudging towards softness. It feels like stone teaching you how to be smooth again. You run it over your knees now. The sound is almost imperceptible, a sandy whisper against skin, but over generations. This humble paste has left its mark. Iranian poets even referenced it in verses cleansing the outer dirt to reflect the inner light. Not bad for something that looks like a dusty hockey puck. Here's a fringe tidbit you might enjoy in the 17th century. Some bathhouses claimed their soap blends could also ward off the evil eye. Little sachets of crushed soap were tied to babies' wrists or hung over doorways, not for cleaning, but as talismans. Science, maybe not, but belief, like cleanliness, comes in many forms. You pause to rinse. Water poured from a copper ewer flows in a smooth arc, tracing the curve of your shoulder before pooling at your feet. You watch the suds, barely there, vanish into a carved channel leading to a runoff basin. Every drop accounted for, every motion intentional. One of the bathhouse attendants passes by now. He glances at your shoulders, nods slightly, and walks on. You're doing fine, but you can tell he's ready to assist if you falter. These workers, often called Dalek or Hamiamchi, knew every stage of this process. They prepared the soaps. They adjusted water temperature by adding cool ladles from a nearby urn. And yes, they monitored your technique, not out of judgment, but to preserve the rhythm. Because that's what the bathhouse was, a rhythm. And cleansing wasn't a task, it was a tempo, a sensory dance. No phone vibrating in your towel, no shampoo running into your eyes while you try to read the back of a bottle in the shower. Just the soft swirl of clay on skin and the occasional creak of stone. Modern spa-goers sometimes marvel at ancient beauty rituals, imagining them as luxury experiences, but in their time, they were both ordinary and essential. Soap wasn't indulgence, it was daily ritual, civic necessity, and intimate wisdom passed down by grandmothers who could mix the perfect skin-soothing balm using nothing but backyard herbs and yesterday's rainwater. You lean back now, one arm across your chest, and feel lighter, not just cleaner, but somehow quieter. The soap has done its work, not just on your skin, but in your thoughts. Tomorrow, someone else will sit where you are. They'll scoop from the same bowl. Maybe their mixture will smell a little different. Maybe they'll prefer a coarser scrub. But they, too, will follow the silent science of slowness. And as you dry your hands on a thin towel, you realize that's the real formula, not the ingredients, but the pause. Now that your skin is tingling from clay and clean water, you return to the garmkane. But this time, you're not just here to sweat. You're here to observe something else, the deeply human choreography of the hammam. You settle onto a smooth stone ledge, watching a slow but steady stream of people enter and exit, each following a rhythm so ingrained. It looks instinctual. First, a merchant lays down his towel, then sits in silence. A tea seller, her ankles wrapped modestly in linen, carefully applies a mixture of rosewater and cephadab to her neck. Beside her, a grandmother dips a small cloth into a basin and methodically wipes her arms, always in the same order: left, right, shoulders, face. This isn't chaos, this is ritual. Every movement in the hammam has been passed down, mimicked, corrected, refined. In a society where many forms of labor were physical, this ritual wasn't just about looking nice. It was body maintenance, preventing soreness, easing circulation, softening calluses, washing off fatigue. The Persian bathhouse became an anatomical sanctuary, one that understood muscle, breath, and stress long before medical schools did. One corner of the room contains a low wooden platform. On it, an attendant gently stretches the arms of a reclining man, one knee bent, one arm above the head. You can hear the subtle clicks of joints releasing, tension evaporating like steam. This isn't a massage spa. This is a continuation of centuries of tactile therapy. And here's the clever part: the sequence is the same for everyone. There is no need for appointment books or timers. Everyone arrives, washes, sits, scrubs, soaks, rests, dries in roughly the same arc. It means no one hurries you, but it also means you never feel the urge to rush. You're part of a communal rhythm, a rhythm that begins with silence and ends with tea. But of course, not all rituals are silent. You hear the slap of a caste cloth, a kind of exfoliating mitt made from rough silk or goat hair, scrubbing skin in tight. Practice strokes. This, too, is a ritual. The attendant begins at the wrists, moves to the shoulders, then circles around the spine in slow figure eights. The body is not just a shell to be polished, it's a map to be followed. Historians still debate whether this sequence originated from ancient medical principles or evolved from local bathhouse culture. Some claim it's based on early humoral theory, stimulating different zones to balance hot, cold, wet, and dry elements within the body. Others argue it was simply learned through generations of practice. Either way, it works. And if you've ever felt the satisfying ache of a deep tissue massage, you already know the results. Next to you, two young boys giggle as they try to mimic their father's motions. He corrects them gently, not with words, but by re-wetting their cloths, showing them again. Even learning how to bathe is inherited, and if you were to come back tomorrow, you'd see the same slow ballet unfold again, scrubbing, rinsing, stretching, soaking. The water might be slightly cooler, the mixture of oils might smell a bit more like bay leaf, but the routine unchanged, as consistent as sunrise. Here's a fun aside during the Safavid period. Some hammams employed bathhouse musicians, not full bands, mind you, but one or two instrumentalists with flutes or hand drums, playing soft rhythms to match the motion of the ritual. Not every hammam could afford it, but those that did became local favorites. Imagine it, your back is being scrubbed as a reed flute lilts above the hiss of steam. Today, of course, most bathhouses rely on silence, but silence isn't empty. It's full of pauses, soft footsteps, the clink of copper bowls, a towel being wrung out. These are the instruments now, and they guide the ritual just as surely. You shift slightly and notice a small wooden shelf carved into the stone wall. Upon it rests a teapot, ornate but chipped, and two shallow ceramic cups. No one rushes to drink. The tea is warm, not hot. Its purpose is not to jolt you awake, but to help you land gently back into your own body after the ritual ends. The herbs vary: black tea in cooler months, chamomile or mint in warmer ones, sometimes rose hips, occasionally saffron. If someone's feeling generous, you take a cup now. The porcelain warming your fingertips. The tea smells faintly of cardamom and dried lime. One sip, then two. You let it settle on your tongue before swallowing. It doesn't cleanse you like the water, but it grounds you just as deeply. There's one last gesture: a small bowl of cold water, poured gently over your feet. A symbolic rinse, a quiet return. Your body is now fully clean. But more than that, it's synchronized with the room, with the people around you, with the architecture itself, and you haven't even said a word. Tomorrow, the ritual will repeat. New faces, same flow, and somewhere in that quiet sequence, someone will feel their shoulders drop, just like you did. You're resting on a warm bench now, the steam having curled around your body like a quiet blanket. When he appears, a Dalek, the bathhouse attendant, not flashy, not boastful. He wears a wrapped waistcloth, a cloth satchel slung over one shoulder, and a steady look in his eyes that tells you this is not his first day or his thousandth. The Dalek isn't a masseur in the modern sense. He's more like a combination of physical therapist, exfoliation expert, and low-key philosopher. Without saying much, he gestures for you to sit forward, and when you do, he begins, with a flat mitt in one hand and a small bowl of warm water in the other. You're about to experience what generations have before you, not pampering, but restoration. He works in silence at first. The mitt scrapes lightly across your back and down your arms, then across your chest. His movements are exact, rhythmic, circular in some places, straight in others. He's not guessing. He's reading your muscles, your posture, your skin's texture, each offering clues over centuries. The Dalek profession became a repository of unspoken anatomical knowledge. They knew where people carried tension before stress was even a word. Some used olive oil, others preferred a mix of sesame and camphor if you had joint pain. He might reach for a bit of warmed beeswax or a paste of crushed fenugreek. The treatments weren't random, they were intuitive, practiced, and based on shared community wisdom. And while mainstream historians record little about individual Daleks, their reputations lived in the mouths of regulars. Go to Riza on Wednesdays. He does the best feet. Avoid the young one. He skips the shoulders. Gossip, but meaningful. You lean into the rhythm now, muscles softening with each pass. The Dalek rolls your shoulders gently, not cracking, just coaxing. The heat from the room, the friction from his cloth, and the gentle pressure of his thumbs begin to synchronize into something that feels less like cleaning and more like unwinding a coil that's been too tight for too long. Historians still argue whether these attendants received formal training or simply apprenticed from youth. Some believe they passed down techniques orally, others through observation and imitation. What's clear is that their role extended beyond bathhouse walls. They were confidants, keepers of unspoken worries, and, occasionally, matchmakers. After all, if you wanted to know who in the neighborhood was strong, healthy, or had an impressive beard, ask a Dalek. He's seen everyone naked. Here's a delightfully fringed tidbit in 18th century Isfahan. Some Daleks doubled as minor medical practitioners. One was known to use leeches stored in clay pots for those seeking bloodletting. Another offered cupping therapy, glass domes heated with flame, then suctioned to the back. Not everyone trusted them, of course, but for many, they were more accessible than a physician and far more hands-on. You breathe deeper now, the attendant working near your spine, his fingers pausing at pressure points you didn't know existed. It's not aggressive, it's not performative. But afterward, your back feels lighter, as if some part of you was unknotted. He rinses you off with a bowl of water poured slowly down your shoulders. The warmth runs in rivulets, collecting on the tiles. He nods once, satisfied, and leaves you there to absorb the results. Across the room, another Dalek is working with an elderly man, gently stretching his arms, guiding him through a series of movements that seem less like a massage and more like a prayer done in motion. The old man isn't speaking, but you can see the way he exhales, slow and deep, when the tension eases from his knees. And that's the true magic of the Dalek, not the strength of their hands, but their awareness of when not to use it, when to press, when to wait, when to simply let the room do the work. Some had small tools, a ribbed wooden scraper, a pumice-like stone, even a horn comb for the scalp. But the core tools were always the same: warm water, friction, and deep listening. Not listening with ears, listening with fingers, with palms. Modern spas might try to replicate the effect, but rarely the relationship, because in the hammam, the Dalek is not just service staff. He's a steward of flow. He maintains the collective rhythm, calibrates the emotional temperature of the space. If someone's moving too quickly, he slows them. If a new visitor seems uncertain, he guides them with the tiniest tilt of a bowl or shift of a towel. You sit upright again now, breath steady. You can still feel the soft imprint of his mitt on your back, like echoes of heat drawn into your skin. Not pain, just presence. And as you stretch your arms, something inside stretches too. Not a ligament, not a tendon, something more abstract. Your awareness, your ease. Whatever it is, the Dalek has touched it, without ceremony, without instruction, just touch, water, and time. You've returned to a quieter corner of the bathhouse now, wrapped in a light cloth, your skin tingling slightly from the Dalek's skillful hands. The air feels thicker here, but it carries more than heat. It carries scent, not just one, but a mosaic of aromas, layered gently across the room like a second kind of steam. You breathe in deeply, and it happens your shoulders drop another notch. This isn't an accident. This is chemistry and memory. The Persian hammam wasn't just a space of water and warmth. It was a chamber of carefully composed scents. From the moment you stepped inside, your senses began to realign, guided by the lingering presence of rosewater, eucalyptus, orange blossom, and earthy resins that had been steeped, crushed, or burned in secret blends. You reach now for a shallow bowl resting beside the basin. It's filled with golab, rosewater. You splash a bit over your wrists and behind your ears. It's faint, never cloying, and the effect is almost immediate. Your breath deepens, your thoughts slow. The rosewater, distilled from the petals of the Rosa damascena, has long been a staple, not just in Persian hygiene, but in medicine and mysticism. Some texts from the medieval period even recommended inhaling rose vapor to relieve heart palpitations and melancholy. Historians still argue whether the use of aromatics in the hammam was primarily medicinal or purely sensorial, but in practice, those lines blur. Rosewater soothes the skin and calms the nerves. Eucalyptus opens the lungs. Bitter orange sharpens the senses when blended and warmed over coals or steeped into basins. These scents don't just smell nice, they do something. There's a hanging sachet nearby, woven from cotton and filled with dried herbs. You squeeze it gently, and a dry puff releases lavender, mint, and maybe just a trace of sandalwood. These sachets were often hung from wooden pegs around the bathhouse, especially near the warmer chambers. When damp air passed over them, the room became subtly perfumed, not overpowering, just present. In some hammams, attendants would add a few drops of essential oil to the rinsing basins, not for show, but to counteract the faint sulfur scent that sometimes accompanied groundwater. In others, tiny sensors were tucked into niches in the wall, burning tree resin or myrrh. You might not see the source, but you'd feel the mood shift. And then there's the special occasion scent oud, rare, expensive, and reserved for weddings, holidays, or high-status guests. Oud smoke wasn't just fragrant, it was a symbol of wealth, of refinement, of ephemeral beauty. The scent lingers long after it's gone, embedding itself in cloth, in hair, in memory, in some homes. A person returning from a hammam that used oud would be greeted with reverence, as if they carried with them a trace of sanctity. You sit a moment longer, tracing the curved lines of the mosaic at your feet. The scent rising around you now is more resinous, perhaps labdanum or benzoin, slightly sweet, slightly smoky. And here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some bathhouses were known for their signature scent blend, much like modern spas brand themselves with custom candles. Travelers would note, the Shiraz hammam smells of pomegranate bark and dried lime, while another might say, in Kasvin, the rooms carry a spice of cardamom and cedar, but the most consistent aromatic, the one that tied everything together, was cider, a powder made from the leaves of the jujube tree. It had a faintly grassy scent, mildly astringent, and was used not just as a cleanser, but as a shampoo, mixed with warm water into a paste. It created a natural foam, not much, but enough. Women especially used cider in the final stages of bathing, letting it soak into their hair before rinsing it out with an infusions of rose or sour orange. You watch now as a young woman ladles water over her hair, the air filling with the gentle scent of cider and citrus peel. She moves slowly, like she's done this 1,000 times, and she probably has. The recipe, like the gesture, is passed down, mother to daughter, neighbor to neighbor, and even in male-only bathhouses. The scents played their role. A man might splash bitter orange water on his face before shaving, or rub badrunj boya, lemon balm, over his wrists before heading back to the bazaar. Scents weren't gendered here. They were layered, practical, beautiful. You dip your cloth into a basin filled with warm water that smells faintly of mint and rose as you wring it out and press it over your face. The sensation is almost cinematic. The warmth, the weight, the scent. It's like being wrapped in memory, not your own necessarily, but one passed down through the walls, the water, the air. And there's something else, something few people talk about, but everyone notices how the scent of the bathhouse clings to you after you leave, not in a perfumed way, in a softened human way. Hours later, as you walk home or rest under a blanket, you'll catch a hint of it on your skin, and it will remind you that you were clean and warm and at ease, and you'll want to go back, not just for the water, but for the way it smelled to be unhurried. You shift now into one of the more open spaces of the sarbinet, the cool, domed chamber where people sit, dry, sip tea, or chat softly under trickling fountains. You settle on a low cushion. The steam has thinned here, and for the first time, voices become clearer, not loud, never loud, but present, human, and curiously intimate. Persian bathhouses, for all their engineering elegance and ritual quiet, were also deeply social. In the hammam, conversations floated like mist, lighter than elsewhere, but somehow more sincere. You weren't at a party. You weren't in the market. You were stripped of layers, both cloth and pretense, and so was everyone else. A man beside you mutters softly about the quality of today's tea. Another offers a quiet joke about taxes. Someone farther down the bench begins reciting a poem, probably Hafez, possibly Rumi, though no one interrupts to clarify. The lines are about rain falling on a vineyard, or maybe about waiting for a lover who never sends word. Either way, it fits. This is the hammam's secret. It was also a salon, a safe space, a semi-public pocket where the boundaries of class, profession, and even politics softened. In the bazaar, A merchant might outbid a cleric. In the mosque, prayers followed hierarchy. But in the bathhouse, everyone sweat, everyone scrubbed, everyone waited their turn for tea. It's said that during the Qajar era, some of the most scathing political satire wasn't found in newspapers. It echoed off bathhouse tiles. Gossip was currency, and the hammam was a marketplace. Who married whom? Which merchant cheated? What edict came from the palace and what it really meant? Sometimes rumors were born here, other times they died with a shake of the head and a well-placed joke. Historians still argue whether these conversations had real political influence or were simply steam-soaked whispers. But one 19th century traveler reported that the pulse of the quarter beats in its bathhouse. That may not be empirical data, but it tells you something. And it wasn't all politics. Of course, much of it was mundane. Your son's teacher is too harsh. Did you see the price of dates this week? My neighbor's new wife snores like a camel. Domestic issues, petty grievances, occasional flirtations. These things matter too. You sip from a clay cup now. The tea is black and slightly bitter, laced with dried lime. A plate of koluche, date-filled cookies, rests beside you. You take one, bite softly. Crumbs stick to your damp fingers. No one minds. In women's bathhouses, the conversations often had a different rhythm but equal depth. They discussed children's fevers, mother-in-law tension, marriage matches. They shared recipes, jokes, advice for staying cool in the summer or for relieving cramps with chamomile compresses. The hammam was where young brides learned from older women, where laughter bounced off tile walls in unguarded bursts. Here's your quirky tidbit in some regions. The bathhouse became such a central space for female bonding that prospective mothers-in-law would observe brides to be there before arranging a marriage. Not just for beauty, but for comportment. How did she move? Was she modest, confident, kind? This was not surveillance. This was a kind of communal interview with water. You hear someone recite now, not poetry, but a riddle, a real one. It has no mouth, yet tells the truth. It has no hands, yet offers proof. What is it? A voice answers, a mirror. There's a pause. Someone chuckles. Another sips tea. The moment passes like a breeze. And above all, there's trust. The hammam required it. You were vulnerable here, half-dressed or fully undressed. Your defenses softened with your skin. You had to trust the attendants not to burn you. You had to trust the stranger beside you not to judge the scar on your shoulder. You had to trust the room to hold your words. Modern life rarely allows this kind of vulnerability. Even when we gather in cafes or lobbies or gyms, there's performance. The phone is always close. The posture is curated. But here, in the hammam, you're allowed to just be, sweat, soak, sit, listen. You finish your tea and lean back against the cool mosaic wall. Your ears catch fragments of a conversation about a lost ring, a favorite cousin returning from Mashhad, someone's niece who is studying medicine and might leave for Europe. No one is speaking urgently. No one is shouting over one another. The words pass through the air like steam, unhurried and strangely profound in their everydayness. And when you close your eyes, the sounds blend with the architecture, the gurgle of a small fountain, the clink of metal spoons, the soft rustle of cloth as someone rises to leave. Tomorrow, new stories will drift through this room, some spoken, some overheard, some never fully understood. But they'll leave their trace, like the scent of rosewater clinging to a dried towel. And you'll carry a few home too, not just in memory, but in the way your voice softens when you talk next, in how you sit a little longer in silence, in how you realize that even behind steam, people are always trying to be understood. The air in this chamber is drier now. The heat fades. The moisture lingers mostly in your skin, your breath, and your quietly soaked towel. You sit still for a moment and watch how people move through the hammam, not just through space, but through unspoken systems. Who nods to whom, who gives way in the corridor, who waits to pour water, and who gets poured for. Persian bathhouses weren't designed to be chaotic free-for-alls. They were constructed with modesty and social nuance at their very core. And while the rules may not be posted on the wall in bold letters, they're everywhere, embedded in gestures, glances, pauses. You're not just navigating hot and cold, you're navigating culture. A younger man waits patiently while an elder rinses his hands. A woman in another chamber wraps a cloth around her shoulders before moving to a brighter space. Two friends speak with lowered voices while a stranger sits nearby, drying his feet. None of this is dictated out loud, and yet, everyone knows. You shift on the bench, and suddenly you understand this isn't only a bathhouse, it's a theater of etiquette. One of the most important principles here, Haya, a deeply rooted sense of modesty that transcends clothing. It's about humility, dignity, respect for others' comfort. In hammams, especially in traditional settings. This shows in how people avert their gaze, how they wrap themselves in cloth before entering communal rooms, and how even the attendants knock softly on inner doors before entering. This doesn't mean everyone's shy or fearful, quite the opposite. There's a quiet confidence in moving gracefully through these unspoken expectations. For many, especially in more conservative areas, going to the hammam meant practicing the art of being seen, just enough, no more. Gender separation was, and still is, a fundamental structure in most Persian bathhouses. In many places, men and women use the same facility, but on alternating days or hours. In others, entirely separate hammams existed, each tailored to its visitors' needs. The differences went beyond scheduling. Some women's bathhouses were brighter, filled with gossip and laughter, others quieter, with rooms for newborns or resting infants. Men's bathhouses might have separate smoking lounges or rooms for backgammon, but both upheld the same core idea: everybody deserves care, and every person deserves respect. You step lightly into a side chamber now, reserved for rest. There's a screen across one corner, just a curtain, barely moving, behind it. You hear the quiet murmur of two women. One seems to be offering a remedy for dry skin: olive oil mixed with egg yolk. You pause, not to listen, but to appreciate the intimacy of that moment, shared between people who trust that these walls, and each other, will hold their privacy. Historians still argue how rigid these codes were. Were they enforced? Were they adaptable? Did they vary from city to city, decade to decade? Some evidence suggests that in smaller villages, things were more relaxed. In large cities, Shiraz, Isfahan, Tabriz, rules were stricter, influenced by local clerics or the elite. Yet even there, exceptions existed during childbirth, after funerals, before weddings. There were times when norms bent gently to accommodate the deeply human, and in all this social navigation, class played a subtle but significant role. Wealthier bath-goers might bring their own cloths, oils, or perfumes. Some had attendants to carry their items. Others bathed simply, with a single towel and a borrowed bowl, but once inside the steam chamber, everyone glistened the same. Steam equalized. No embroidery made sweat more elegant. No silver ladle made your rinse more cleansing. Here's your quirky tidbit in some 18th century hammams. Wealthier patrons could rent a quiet hour, a period when the bathhouse would be emptied and reserved for one individual or family. A privilege, certainly, but not always admired, in fact. Some poetry from the time mocks this habit. What joy is there in silence, if not shared with laughter and splashing back in the main chamber? You witness another common scene. A boy hesitates at the edge of the hot pool. An older man beside him offers a hand, steadying his step. They don't speak, but there's understanding. This, too, is etiquette, teaching, guiding, supporting, without turning help into spectacle. You rinse your feet now in a shallow basin and catch your own reflection in the rippling water. You've been through heat and scent, touch and stillness. But the moment you'll remember most might be this realizing how delicately humans can coexist when their environment expects and rewards grace. Not perfection, just grace. And as you rise again, wrapping the towel more tightly around your shoulders, you do so without needing to think. The etiquette has become instinct. The body has learned the room. The spirit has learned the pause. The warmth returns to your joints now, not from the steam, but from a radiant heat that seems to rise out of the tiles themselves. You're back near the garmkhane, where a corner alcove holds copper bowls, a small wooden bench, and something that looks more medical than ornamental, a bundle of dried herbs, wrapped in linen and tied with string. You're here for something specific, not relaxation this time, restoration, because in the Persian world, the hammam wasn't just for cleansing or conversation, it was for healing. For centuries, Persian physicians integrated the bathhouse into their medical recommendations. Fevers, digestive complaints, menstrual cramps, melancholy, migraines. There was a hammam regimen for nearly every ailment. This wasn't superstition. It was grounded in the humoral system, yes, but it also reflected a lived understanding of the body's response to temperature, moisture, and flow. You sit and dip your hands into a small basin of warm water. The air feels thicker in this room, like the warmth has weight, and it should. It's carrying with it the remnants of centuries of diagnosis, trial, and bodily intuition. A small sign, probably added centuries after the bathhouse was first built. Lists a few gentle reminders. Don't bathe on a full stomach. Pause between hot and cold. Rest before leaving. Simple advice, but rooted in complex thinking. Under the medical philosophies of Avicenna ibn Sina, whose canon of medicine shaped Islamic, Persian, and European practice for centuries, bathing was considered an essential therapeutic process, not just for removing impurities, but for balancing the internal forces of the body. Too hot, and the spirit becomes agitated. Too cold, and the organs seize. The hammam offered calibrated exposure to moist heat, aiding circulation, digestion, and even mental clarity. You soak your feet now in a shallow basin where mint leaves float lazily. This isn't modern aromatherapy. This is an old remedy for nervous tension and mild headaches. The mint cools the blood, the heat loosens the joints, and the silence quiets the mind. You begin to understand why a bath could be prescribed, and not just baths, specific sequences, a short time in the garmkhane, followed by a cold rinse, light massage on the legs, a warm tea of ginger and cinnamon, then dry rest. Physicians wrote it all down, step by step, like a recipe for rebalancing the self. Historians still argue how many of these treatments were actually based on physiological outcomes versus symbolic thinking. But the point remains, people felt better after. And isn't that the point? A low bench beside you holds a small bundle of crushed myrtle leaves. Myrtle was used to treat skin conditions, eczema, sunburn, irritation. It was ground into a poultice and applied gently to affected areas. Other herbs were added to basins to help with sinus pressure and for deep fatigue. A Dalek might recommend a short nap in the cool room after a full hammam sequence. Let the body remember itself, they would say. Here's your fringe fact for this chamber. Some Persian hammams were built directly beside Bimaristans, early hospitals. Patients would be walked, slowly and under guidance, into the bathhouse as part of their recovery. It was believed that the environment, heat, scent, sound, would aid healing just as much as the herbs or syrups dispensed in the ward. And modern studies now suggest they may have been right. You rise now, slower than before. There's no dizziness, no stiffness. Your blood has moved. Your skin breathes freely. You feel not energized exactly, but clear, polished from the inside out. And the room itself seems to understand. The mosaic tiles reflect your silhouette faintly. The archways muffle your footfall. Even the distant clink of a copper bowl feels timed to your movement. You hear someone murmuring now, not to you, but to a companion. He's been coming every Thursday since his son passed. The sentence floats and dissolves. You don't know who he is, but you understand. The hammam wasn't just for broken bones or sluggish digestion. It was for grief, too. For solitude that still keeps you tethered to community. For being alone without being lonely. A woman in another corner lights a small bundle of dried esfand, wild rue. The seeds pop and smoke faintly. It's a protective ritual meant to ward off negative energy. A practice with Zoroastrian roots, still alive beneath Islamic overlay, still practiced today in homes and bathhouses alike. You don't need to believe in its power to appreciate the act. The gesture itself is healing. You sit again, this time not to wash, but to rest. Your towel is warm, your breath is slow, and in this pause, you realize that healing here isn't linear. It isn't a problem fixed. It's a state restored tomorrow. Someone else will soak where you've soaked. Someone else will chase away their pain in a cloud of eucalyptus and myrtle. The hammam doesn't ask what hurts. It just offers a place to start letting go. You sit now beneath a small skylight, its colored glass casting faint pools of light across the tile, gold, pale green, a dusky blue, around you. The bathhouse seems to hold its breath, not with silence, but with anticipation. This isn't the everyday rhythm of sweat and scrubbing. This is a special hour, the astrologer's hour. In some Persian communities, especially during the Safavid and Qajar periods, bathing wasn't just a matter of hygiene or healing, it was timing, cosmic timing. When you bathed mattered, and for those who could afford the luxury, consulting the stars became part of the process. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the scene: a slim, bearded man in an adjacent room, seated behind a carved wooden screen. On the table before him are tools of the trade, parchment scrolls, an astrolabe, perhaps even a silver inkwell. He traces planetary positions, notes the lunar phase, considers your birth hour and the placement of Mercury before saying, calmly, begin your bath at the second hour after sunrise. You chuckle softly. It sounds extravagant now, but back then, it wasn't ridiculous. It was responsible. Persian astrology wasn't about fortune telling with crystal balls. It was a deeply studied science, blending mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Scholars believed that the alignment of stars and planets could influence everything from digestion to mood. And since the bathhouse affected your inner balance, warmth, circulation, spiritual clarity, it made sense to align it with celestial rhythms. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or reserved for the elite. Some evidence suggests that in cities like Isfahan, well-to-do patrons wouldn't enter the hammam until their astrologer gave the nod. Others say it was more symbolic than literal, a nod to the heavens before slipping into the steam. You rise and walk to the edge of a small pool, its surface nearly motionless. For a moment, it reflects not just your face, but the colored light above, as if the heavens themselves were watching. You remember that in Zoroastrianism, Persia's pre-Islamic belief system, cleanliness was divine, water was sacred, and timing sacred too. Washing during sunrise or under the influence of Venus was believed to bring peace. Washing under Mars, perhaps a little too stimulating, even after the rise of Islam, when astrology became a more debated science. Its influence lingered in subtle ways. Some bathhouses were built to face a particular direction, like prayer spaces, aligned with sacred geometry. Some even embedded zodiac tiles into their design, not overt, but quietly suggestive. And it wasn't just the time of day that mattered. Some believed in choosing bathing days based on planetary rulers. Thursdays were ruled by Jupiter, favorable, generous, good for cleansing. Mondays belonged to the moon, sensitive, best for reflection. No one, however, seemed to favor Tuesday, too fiery, too brash. You wouldn't want your pores open under the gaze of Mars. Here's your quirky tidbit. One 17th century Persian text advised pregnant women to bathe only during hours when the moon was benevolently aspected, to avoid stirring anxiety in the unborn child. That may sound speculative today, but at the time, it was an act of care, of attunement, a mother aligning her body with the cosmos to offer the gentlest start to a new life. You sit again, now in a corner chamber lined with dark green tiles. A small hourglass rests nearby, not for precision, but as a gentle reminder that time, like heat, is meant to be felt, not measured. Someone enters and sprinkles a few drops of rose water into a basin, murmuring a prayer under their breath, whether it's to God, to the stars, or to themselves. You don't know, and it doesn't matter. The intention is clear to match the inner with the outer, to cleanse not just what clings to the skin, but what lingers in thought. And perhaps that's the larger truth behind the astrologer's hour. Not that the planets control your destiny, but that pausing to ask when is another way of learning to slow down. To remember that your body is not a machine, but a participant in something much larger. The moon pulls the sea. Why not the heart? The room grows warmer again, and you feel it without checking a clock. Your body begins to guide you once more. You've had enough heat, enough silence, enough cosmic alignment, for now. You rise with a sense of quiet precision, towel wrapped snugly, breath steady. Whether the stars are watching or not, you've honored something timeless, a ritual shaped by sky and stone alike. And the next time you feel unsettled, anxious, or disjointed, you might remember this, not just the hammam, but the idea that even ordinary acts, like bathing, can have rhythm, season, gravity. You don't need an astrologer to remind you, just a moment of attention, because even without looking up, you've spent this whole time realigning. The tiles beneath your feet change now, less geometric, more fluid, with vines and blossoms stretching across them in deep blues and faded ochres. The air feels heavier, but it's not from the steam. It's from something more intricate, more complicated, the weight of history, because the bathhouse isn't just an architectural marvel or a space of restoration. It's a site of quiet tension, of centuries of negotiation between science and faith, tradition and change, body and law. You step slowly into the main sarbonnet again, trailing a hand across the cool mosaic wall. This place has endured more than foot traffic and condensation. It's weathered edicts, religious reform, artistic censorship, and cultural debate, and somehow, gracefully, stubbornly, it remains. Take the tiles you see now, floral, winding, lush, in the pre-Islamic era. Imagery in Persian bathhouses sometimes included human forms, dancers, gods, mythological scenes. But after Islam became dominant, especially in more conservative periods, such depictions were often removed or painted over. Islamic aesthetics favored abstraction and geometry, repeating stars, calligraphic flourishes, and floral arabesques that avoided the human figure. Yet even in restriction, creativity bloomed. Artisans invented entire visual vocabularies to express joy, balance, and sensuality without violating religious constraints. A cluster of grapes might represent abundance. A twisting cypress tree could suggest grace. A stylized lion hinted at power. These images still linger here, half buried beneath layers of lime wash or surviving in restored hammams, where restorers carefully peel back plaster like old parchment. You pass a pillar and spot a tile panel, imperfectly preserved, but still vivid. A garden motif, perhaps from the Safavid period. And you wonder, was this always visible, or did it survive because someone chose not to whitewash it during a later wave of puritanical reform? Historians still argue whether bathhouses were ever truly accepted by religious authorities. Some clerics praised their cleanliness, their utility for ritual ablutions. Others viewed them with suspicion as places of vanity, immodesty, or even temptation at various points. Hammams were subject to moral codes, shorter operating hours, strict gender separation, even surveillance, and yet they persisted because the people who used them, the vendors, the midwives, the travelers, the aunts and cousins, needed them, and they adapted. They wore longer cloths, they added private cubicles, they whispered instead of sang, but they still came. You imagine now a Friday morning, perhaps 2 centuries ago. A religious official visits the hammam, inspecting the layout, the segregation of spaces, the behavior of patrons. His expression is stern, but then he dips his hand into a basin. The water is clean, the air warm, no laughing voices, just the scrape of soap, the hush of rinsing. He nods once and leaves. The hammam exhales. Life continues. This wasn't rebellion. It was resilience. In some cities, compromise took stranger forms. A hammam might hide certain tile panels behind cloth screens or remove murals during religious holidays. In others, private patrons paid extra to preserve what they loved: a mosaic dome, a cedar wood bench, an entrance inscription. For as long as this bathhouse stands, one reads, Let there be peace within its walls. A wish, maybe, but a powerful one. And then there's the gender divide. In modern times, as Iran's politics and laws have evolved, the hammam has reflected those shifts. Some became entirely male or female spaces, others closed altogether. Still others were repurposed into museums, cafes, even art galleries, beautiful but no longer functional. The water gone, the voices silenced. And yet, in places like Yazd and Kashan, traditional hammams continue, not because they avoided conflict, but because their communities held them close, like something worth negotiating for. You step now into a narrow passage, a transitional space, cooler, quieter. On the wall is a single inscription in calligraphy, not poetic, not religious, just a line from a mid-19th century bathhouse manual. The guest must be treated with gentleness, for he carries with him what you do not see. It's ambiguous, and that's the point. In a space where so much was debated, what to show, what to hide, what to preserve, gentleness was the constant, even under scrutiny. The hammam offered softness, even as walls were painted over. The rooms kept their warmth. Here's your fringe detail during one brief period in the 1930s. A campaign in Tehran tried to replace traditional bathhouses with modern European bathing facilities. They promised tiled showers, individual stalls, cold water pressure, but many citizens resisted. Where is the silence? One elderly woman reportedly asked. Where is the rose water? You smile, imagining her standing in a tiled chamber, towel tight around her shoulders, unimpressed by chrome fixtures, because in the end, the hammam wasn't about modernity or nostalgia. It was about continuity and what it meant to carve out, generation after generation, a space for slowness, ritual, and care, even under watchful eyes. You pass once more into the center room. The light is different now, angled, richer. It spills across the floor like liquid copper, and as you stretch your legs, you wonder how many walls in the world have heard this much contradiction and chosen, simply, to remain. The steam is gentler now, and the floor beneath your feet holds a cooler warmth, like a pot left off the fire but still remembering it. You're nearing the end of the bathhouse journey, but before you go, you must witness a shift, not in temperature, but in time, because everything changes, and the hammam was no exception. You sit in the sarbine once more, where signs of wear blend with signs of preservation. Cracks in the tile beside newly repainted arches, a vintage towel rack next to a modern light fixture. You're in a space that tried to resist the 20th century, and then, very slowly, began to adapt. The decline of the Persian hammam didn't happen all at once. It was a slow drying out, one room at a time. The reasons were many: urbanization, new hygiene habits, shifting norms of modesty, Western plumbing, families installed showers in their homes, doctors no longer prescribed steam and rosewater for fevers, and for some, the old bathhouse began to feel outdated. You picture it now, an old hammam in the 1950s, its domes intact, its tiles chipped, the water still warm, but fewer voices in the room. A man rinses his arms in silence. A woman, on the next day's rotation, folds her towel more carefully than usual. Attendance is thinning, but no one wants to say it. By the 1970s, many bathhouses had closed or been repurposed. Some were dismantled entirely. Others were boarded up, forgotten. A few became storage spaces, quietly absurd, housing crates of canned goods or motorcycle parts in rooms once filled with eucalyptus, steam, and poetry. Historians still debate whether this decline was inevitable or hastened by policy? Did health campaigns unintentionally shame communal bathing? Did urban design abandon the value of proximity and ritual? Or was it simply that people, given new technologies, chose faster paths, but not everyone gave up on the hammam? In the 1990s and early 2000s, a quiet movement began to reawaken these spaces. Architects, historians, and citizens, some nostalgic, others visionary, started to restore old bathhouses, not always to their original function, but always with reverence. Glazed tiles were repaired, granite channels were uncovered, forgotten murals were brushed clean, and in a few cases, the steam returned. You visit one now, not in imagination, but in memory, drawn from places like Yazd, Kerman, Shiraz, even Tehran. A newly restored bathhouse opens its doors. The temperature rises. The aroma of rose and lime blossoms again. A soft light filters down through the repaired dome. Visitors walk barefoot, their footsteps echoing like the first drops of rain on a dry floor. The clientele is different now, more diverse, more curious. Tourists sip herbal tea beside locals who still remember the old rituals. The etiquette is softer, but the structure holds. A new generation moves through old rooms, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. You notice one detail: no one brings a phone into the Garmkhane. It's not a rule, it's just understood. And here's your gentle oddity in one revived bathhouse in Isfahan. The restorers placed an anonymous suggestion box in the Sarbine. The first card read, "Please play the flute music again, like in the old days." The second, "I don't mind the new lights, but don't make it too bright. This is a quiet place." What a modern complaint. What a timeless desire. You wrap your towel a little tighter. The air is no longer so wet, but it still carries that soft note of clay and warmth. And you realize the yamam survived not because it was strong, but because it was adaptable. It shrank, rested, waited, and then, when the moment was right, it reemerged, older, quieter, still needed. Some bathhouses are now museums, yes, but others are alive again. And even the ones that aren't, you still live in people's bodies, in how they bathe slowly, in how they make tea, in how they pause before rinsing, just to let the warmth linger. Because decline is not the same as death, and silence is not the same as forgetting. You rise now. The sun outside has lowered. The light through the glass oculi glows amber. You touch the wall one last time. The tiles are cool, let's see, but you know. Beneath them, the heat still hums. You're back where you began now, near the threshold, barefoot on the mosaic floor, towel still damp in your hands. The hammam has quieted. The voices have faded, so most guests have gone, but you linger, not because you're unsure of the exit, but because leaving feels like waking from a different kind of sleep. The air is cooler, but your skin still radiates the heat it absorbed. You breathe slowly, no rush, one more room, one more moment, because something's changed, not in the hammam, but in you. You sit again on the low marble bench in the Sarbine, the entry chamber that never fully loses its chill. Around you, the final rituals of the day play out. A woman dries her feet with a soft cloth. A man pours a last basin of water, slow and quiet, as though offering thanks. A child giggles, then hushes himself, as if even he understands that the echo should sleep. This is the bathhouse at its most gentle, not empty, but resting, not silent, but softened. And now, something even more unexpected happens. You're not thinking about water anymore, or temperature, or even history. You're thinking about breath, and how each inhalation here feels rounder, fuller, less greedy. The hammam teaches you to take in only what you need. That's always been part of the ritual. Not just the scrub and rinse, but the return. You don't exit the hammam the way you entered. There's a deliberate unwinding. The rooms get cooler, the tiles rougher, the light sharper. The heat leaves you gradually, like a careful goodbye. In some bathhouses, this part was the most beloved. A final cup of warm tea, a quiet conversation with the Dalek, a small comb run through still damp hair, a reminder that the outside world could wait one more minute. You reach now for your clothes, but they're not fancy, just yours, worn, softened by time. You slip into them slowly, like layering yourself back into the day. But something remains, not just moisture, not just scent, something subtler, the calm. And you realize, with a kind of grateful clarity, the hammam was never just a place to clean the body. It was a place to restore the pace. Historians still debate what these spaces meant to their societies. Were they sacred, secular, practical, symbolic? The answer, of course, is yes to all of it. Because the hammam lived at the intersection of touch, temperature, time, and trust. It was not one thing. It was everything softened. You take one final look around. The domes above you catch the fading light. The walls, worn but proud, seem to sigh in the stillness, and somewhere below your feet, perhaps still trickling in ancient stone, the sonnet carries on, and you smile, because no matter how many centuries pass, some things never stop flowing. Let it all fade now. You're no longer sitting on a marble bench. You're resting wherever you are, in your own bed, beneath a soft blanket, with nothing pressing at the edges of your thoughts. The hammam has done its work. The water has evaporated. The warmth remains. Breathe in just once, a little slower than usual. Let the air fill your chest, the way the steam once filled that dome above your head. Then let it out, long, easy, thoughtless. The scent of rosewater still lingers, not on your skin. Maybe, but in the quiet way your shoulders have forgotten to stay tense. The memory of warmth clings like a shadow to your breath. The tiled walls are gone, but the hush of that chamber remains. You carry it now, and it asks for nothing. It simply exists with you. Imagine the light dimming slowly through those tiny colored windows overhead. Imagine the last drop of water sliding from your hair. Imagine the way the silence felt thick, not empty, like it was made to hold you. And now, forget all that. Forget the bathhouse. Forget the structure, the tiles, the air. Let your mind wander like mist along old walls. Let your muscles feel heavy and soft and still. There's no history quiz, no architectural footnote, no perfect exit, only now, only rest. The door has closed gently behind you. The night outside is cool, but kind. The day has been rinsed away, and everything else can wait until morning.